Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Rise and Resonate. This is a podcast dedicated for those who want to lead with influence, make needed impact, and earn more income. I'm Alicia Pisani. I'm a motivational speaker, number one international best-selling author, journalist, coach, and I'm happy to start with you today. And I'm pleased today to introduce Gene Kopczyk. He and I met less than a year ago, and it's something that it's about time to have him on the show. He's doing amazing things in the world, and I cannot wait for you to hear what he has to offer. Gene, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Elisa. I'm glad to be here today. I'm glad you're able to make some time.
Good, good. Well, Gene, tell her, I've heard you refer to yourself as a performance specialist, and that's
Yes.
not a typical term, but it says a lot. Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you came to be a performance specialist.
Yeah. My road went kind of sideways growing up. I thought I was going to go be a pilot and do all these other things, and that just didn't work out. I ended up going to school, like mom and dad said, and I have a degree in psychology. I majored in psychology, and I minored in criminal justice, thinking there's always been crazy people and there's always been criminals, so I'll have a job. And ultimately, I ended up not using that either. I figured out pretty quick that, um, the job market, the way it was when I got out of college, was not that great for therapy or for social workers or things of that nature. And the other thing I found, I was a little discouraged with results. I realized that, you can get results. Psychologists get tremendous results, psychiatrists do, but it takes a long time. And the one thing we don't have here is a long time. And so I wanted to figure out how to make people go further faster. And so that's where the performance specialist comes in. So what I do when I work with people is we figure out what the root cause of the problem is. I help them find the problem, find the answer, and move on as quickly as possible.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, you mentioned school and you graduated, but I happen to know that that was no easy feat either. Can you tell our audience a little bit about your youth and how you got through school to make it to
Absolutely.
college?
Yeah, sure. No, I was never supposed to go to college. In fact, I remember distinctly I would say almost the night my life changed. It was a cold winter evening and it had snowed. And I remember I was sitting in the hallway outside my junior high school guidance counselor's office, thinking about how I didn't want to go home and shovel snow. And then I was kind of eavesdropping. My parents were there for a consultation with him because I was not doing well in school. In fact, I almost failed first grade. I was not even supposed to make it very much further. I was tested and they determined that I was learning disabled, is what they told my parents was the label I got. He was learning disabled. I had dyslexia. There was a whole host of problems. I mean, all the stuff that they told my parents as a kid, I don't remember. But they continued that path with me. I went to resource rooms, all these types of things. And, as a kid, I was bullied and made fun of relentlessly over and over daily. I had to take Ritalin. And back then, you had to actually go take it twice a day. So they would call over the PA speaker to have me come down to the office to take. So everybody knew there was no hiding it. And I took my fair share of ribbing for it. But I remember I was sitting in that hallway and I heard him tell my parents, listen, numbers don't change. The numbers are in, and you're expecting way more of this kid than he's ever going to deliver. Kids like him, we've seen him come through here. He's really a drain on resources for us. People like him typically end up in a juvenile home or in prison. They don't really graduate, they don't make it through the system. And I remember hearing him say that, and I thought, that can't be right. That can't be how my story ends. And there was an unintended effect years before that that my father, when I got labeled learning disabled, he took an interest, and I thank God that he did. And looking at it now, I know what he was doing. He was looking for some skill set that I had. He began to teach me everything every weekend. We were doing stuff. I mean, if he didn't know about it, he would go read about it, and then we were going to go try it that weekend. And we did stuff from construction work to installing electrical wires to working on cars to manicuring trees and how to grow grass. I mean, he taught me everything under the sun. And as did my mom. She taught me how to sew, how to wash clothes, how to cook, how to. And here I sat hearing this guy say I wasn't going there. I thought, but I can do all these things. I can do anything. How can you say I'm not going to make it? And so the game was on, I guess, so to speak, then. And I thought, you just watch my smoke, pal. I am going to make it. And so ultimately, I did graduate. Uh, and then I wasn't the sharpest knife in the drawer. I graduated with just shy of what I needed to get into college. I had the college I wanted to go. I wanted to go to U of M. And then I was told I'd never get into U of M. No, not with your grade point. Guys like you don't go there. You go to go over to Mott or go to community college. I said, well, no. I want to go to U of M. That was my dad's favorite school, and kind of to honor him, I wanted to go. And they said no. And I remember filling the form out. They gave me the form and I'm filling everything out. And they said, well, it's a waste of time and money, but it's your money. And so I filled the form and there was one line on the bottom that had like comments if you want to make a comment. And I wrote in there, I have attention deficit disorder. I have dyslexia. And getting through high school was a challenge, but I still did it. And if you just give me a chance, I won't let you down. And I think it was about 3 weeks later, I got a call from the dean's office, and they let me in on this thing that was called the challenge program. They said you have to go to, basically, I had to go to a guidance counselor, and I had to report into him once a week, and I had to uh, do all these different paperwork and all these things to prove I was doing all the work, and I had to keep a journal and a log of all the assignments that they returned in or not turned. I mean, it was difficult. They put me through the ringer, but if I did that for a semester and I maintained a C average, they would release me as a regular student. And I said, let's do it. And ultimately, when I left college, I had been on the dean's list. I gotten awards for minorities in higher education. I had done a lot of things in college. Had volunteered for different, productions, and I worked in theater. I did all kind of stuff while I was there. So, yeah, I wasn't supposed to make it, and yet somehow here I am. Not only did I do that, but I continued on and authored books and um, built parts for cars for companies, and I started a quality control company in Detroit, Michigan, and I've obviously I do coaching. I do, I work with people. I'm a speaker. I mean, there's just about nothing. I'm a pilot. There's just about nothing I don't do. It's probably easier to tell you what I don't do. Just tell you what I do.
Yeah. So, all right. So let me just back up a little bit there.
Sure.
We heard so much, and thanks for your honesty, transparency. You you made a choice at that young age, sitting in that junior counselor office on that cold winter day, and you said to yourself that that couldn't be right, that that destiny that someone else had set out for you wasn't going to happen. And you knew you had something inside yourself that told you otherwise. And that intuition is something that a lot of people don't listen to. They quiet it down. They just go with what people tell them, or they do jobs or relationships, whatever the case for each person, but they don't listen to that intuition. And I just want to highlight that because you have that knowledge and that belief in yourself, that you were able to make a choice. You got through to the college that you wanted to go to. You made another choice that you were going to graduate, and to hear that you earned awards, made the dean's list, you were able to then go out, start your own business, and really live a life of where you were thriving and making choices to do more and to get further faster. It sounds
No, you're
so.
right. But that
So
night, you're right. I made a choice, but that little voice you talking about, we all have it. We all have it. And you're right. We try to squash it and silence it, and because we're taught to be quiet and not stand up for ourselves, right? And in the back of my mind, I heard that little voice tell me right here, right now, decide. And I've actually heard that voice multiple times throughout my life when I've had a big decision to make, or when my father got sick and I had to take him off life support. And it's just over and over again. I've heard that voice tell me right here, right now, decide, because your destiny is shaped in moments of decision.
yes.
And so if you try to quiet that, you're only fooling yourself.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. And many of us have that decision point at some point in our life after we realize there's something we're not going to stand for, or there's something we're not going to settle for. And I know, Jean, you're also a motivational speaker. So I want to highlight that for people. And I love your background there. Find your passion and live the dream. You have a book out, the Motivation Manifesto. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about that?
Sure. Actually, both of those are books. Find Your Passion, Live Your Dream is the first book I wrote. It came out in 2016. It was a wonderful birthday gift. They released it on my birthday in 2016. And then, yeah, the Motivation Manifesto came out a week ago, week and a half ago, it was released. And that's a co-authorship with myself, Les Brown, and a few other authors who have overcome their circumstances. They didn't let their circumstances determine what their future was going to be. And Find Your Passion, Live the Dream. I go through the process and I try to make it. It was funny because the book started as huge, like it was 400 pages. And I thought, I know how my brain works. Having ADD, it's, squirrel. I'll just run off in all kind of different directions. And I thought, no, I kept chopping it down until I got right to the root of this is what somebody needs to know and get out of their own head and get onto what they really want to do. And so I think it's only like 115 or 16 pages. I finally got it down to. But it's funny because I've had a lot of people read it. I get a lot of feedback from it. And I don't get a lot of reviews. I wish more people would go review it, but they'll call me or they'll email me about it, which I think is great. Um, and I know, like for example, the one lady, she was working for a company and wanted to start her own business, and she told me she bought my book, and she was actually like a friend of mine, and she was riding up north with her husband. They were going into northern Michigan for a weekend, and she started reading it, and she had met me once or twice. And I get this text message. Is it weird that I hear your book in your voice when I'm reading it? She's like, but it's even more weird. Why am I crying? And I said, because I'm in your head now. And you know what you've been doing is not the real you, Tina. You
Mhm.
know that. And that's why it hurts. So I've had a lot of success with that book. And then the Motivation Manifesto, I was offered that opportunity. And, hey, who's not going to take an opportunity to be in a book with Les Brown? I mean, the guy is a phenomenal speaker. He's, world renowned. And I've looked up the Les. I've actually been listening to Les Brown probably since around 1999, 2000. I got his first tape. It was called "It's Not Over Until I Win," and it was a tape that was distributed to MLM. You were in this particular MLM group. It was a talk he did for this MLM group, and I wore that tape out. I had to buy two more copies of it before I figured out how to burn it to a CD. So I bought copies of it. But the funny part about that was, you know, my grandmother, I used to take her shopping on Thursdays. She's passed away now, but she got in my car and she saw it laying on the floor in between the seats. And she said, "Where did you get that?" Because she recognized the name. And I said, "Well, it's part of this thing I'm doing." And she said, "Don't listen to that man. He can't help you do anything." And I said, "Well, why is that?" Now, she didn't know I'd already listened, but she said, "Because down at the Penobscot building where I clean at night, I've caught him sleeping on the floor in his office."
Oh,
And I thought, whoa, Grandma, you don't even know. You just verified everything he said on that tape. That was exactly the story he had told. That at one point he was sleeping in his office in the Penobscot building, and that's where my grandmother cleaned on midnights, and had caught him sleeping in his office. So to have
wow.
the opportunity, yeah, it was kind of like I joked with Les when I was with him. I said, yeah, it was predetermined that we were going to end up meeting somehow. You don't have that story and don't get an opportunity to share it.
Yeah. Now you okay, so Les Brown is I know a mentor that I look to for inspiration. What do you think you would tell your clients when they had a stressful situation to deal with? And how would you reflect on your past, as Les does, to guide them?
It depends on the client, depends on what they're going through. It's funny because I work with a lot of things. One of the things I guess we didn't mention is I'm also part of the Neuro Encoding Institute. I work with Joseph McClellan III, and I sit on some boards there and I do some reviews for them. And it's a wonderful thing. And that program is all about the same thing, going further faster. And I tell people all the time, if you're looking for motivation, you want to listen to Les Brown. If you're having a bad day or you're having problems or a struggle or whatever, there's nobody like Les that can immediately drag you out of that and get your mind straight and get you moving forward again. And a lot of the times I feel like it's for people that know where they want to go. They predetermine where they want to go, but we all get bogged down sometimes and our batteries run low and we feel like we're not making progress, even when we are, because it's not moving as fast as we want. And that's where a lot of most people's frustration comes in. He can snap you out of that like nobody I've seen. When you get into Tony Robbins or other guys that I've listened to, Casey Comden, Joseph McClellan, Dr. Stephen Crawford, all these guys are not the rah rah, no, we're going to do it, we're going to do it. These guys are we're going to figure out what the problem is, solve it now, and it's not going to bother you again, and we're moving forward. And so that's when I say it depends on what the client's going through and what they're facing. Sometimes it's we're having a bad day. We all have them. We're all human. And sometimes it's an outside source or some force of nature that blindsides you on an idle Tuesday afternoon. And now you've got a new problem that you have to figure out. It's funny. I heard a guy in a meeting I was in one time. He said, by show of hands, how many people like surprises? And the whole room just everybody raised their hand. Yeah, yeah. And he said, bullshit. You like the surprises that you like. Everything else you call problems. And he's not wrong. Everything's
Oh,
a
how
surprise.
true.
It's
How
just how
true.
we look at it. Yeah.
That's true. So reframing our perception can mean a lot. So
Oh,
in
absolutely.
yeah, and when I sent you the questionnaire to interview on this show, you mentioned difficult situation as in financial problems. I know
Yeah.
that Gene, you have done more than many people in such a short amount of time, both good and not so good. I mean, you battled cancer. You mentioned your father taking him off life support, struggling in your own education and also in your business. So a lot of people today are being entrepreneurs. They're following that entrepreneurial spirit and they're not only trying to make a life at home for themselves and their family, but they're also trying to take off a business. Now, what advice do you have for people that might be entrepreneurs or struggling financially?
People that struggle financially, the trick to struggling financially is A, how'd you get there? Wherever you are in your life, you made an appointment to be there. So that's the first thing we got to look at. What do we do and what habits can we change to get you away from that? And some of them are very easy. And some you'll find most of the time it's just habits that got to be broken. It's just a pattern of behavior that we got into that we're comfortable with. And sometimes we keep doing it and don't know how. I mean, I've talked to people, I have had clients that how many, reoccurring bills that you have for, you know, apps on your phone or for all the, oh, I mean, you should see their eyes like, oh, and well, one day one day becomes 2 months and becomes a year. And now you've just paid these people and paid them and never taken advantage of it. So sometimes there's easy fixes. Sometimes you got to get what I call creative financing. And I was just working with a client the other day. I'm obviously not going to give you his name, but owns his own company. He's been renting, and the landlord came and said he's selling the business. He's selling the building. Sorry, he's selling the building. And so he called me. He said, "Gene, I don't know what to do. I've been here. I'm established here. I said, well, I think the answer is pretty clear. Buy the building. If you want to stay in business, buy the building, or you have to go somewhere else. So you have to weigh the cost of. Well, then I found out that this guy's got like 15 acres plus this building. And I said, well, I think, you know, last time I checked, guy's not making any more real estate. So real estate is always a good investment to get in. I said, plus if you're there, and then he goes on to tell me that part of it's divided up and there's rental properties on this property that he would get with the deal. And I said, well, so if something was to happen to you, what you're telling me is there's still income coming in off of that property that would essentially make the payment if you had to. And he said, well, yeah. And I said, well, then the first thing I think you need to do is give this guy a down payment to show that you're serious. And he said, yeah, but I don't think I can get the loan. I said, well, go to the credit union, go to the bank and see what they'll tell you. See what they'll tell you. And then if you don't have the capital to put up, go back to the guy and see if he'll land contract part of it for you for a year. I said, because 9 times out of 10, you'll go back to a bank and they'll just go ahead and roll it over into a loan after a year of land contracting. You paid all the payments. So he's all excited now and but that's what I mean. Sometimes you got to get creative. You
Mm,
can't just, well, I don't think the bank will do it. Well, the bank might not, but if this guy really wants to move, he might help you. And he knows you and you've been a customer of his. He's been there, he told me, for 10 years. I said, have you ever missed a payment? He said, no. I said, well, I think this guy would trust you wholeheartedly to give you a land contract for 1 year and you've never missed a payment to the fella, you know, if
right.
you needed it. And then as we started talking, he figured out he probably wouldn't even need most of it because the property is valued at, let's say, $550,000 and the guy is looking to sell it to him for 400. So he's starting out with capital in the property. I said, well, I said, that's up to you, but if you need more information, let me know. And he has called me a couple of times. We've gone through a couple other things, but it looks like he's moving forward on that. But I've been in situations where I looked at my wife and told her, I don't know how we're going to pay the house payment next month. We got $35 left in the checking account.
Mm,
And I had to figure my way out of that. And that became using credit. I don't recommend it for everybody, but there are credit cards out there that'll give you 6 months, same as cash. They'll give you. And so I took a small loan against my credit card, the same as cash, until I could get back on my feet and get moving. Does that work for everybody? No.
mm.
But there's always a way. We just have to find it. There's always a way, especially in today's society.
Yeah, and that again, I think it goes back to those perspectives that we talked about, where you can, if you take a moment, step back, or rely on a coach, a mentor, performance specialist such as yourself to help to see that world from a greater place, higher perspective, and you can see how things can turn around. I know
Oh,
that
yeah.
investing can do a lot. So instead of just paying things and looking to do what you can, there's investments. They say we need 8 or 9 different income streams now. So it's really important to do that, to stay current.
You're right, Alicia. It's true. And let me ask you, where do they teach you this? You just mentioned they're saying now we need 8 or 9 different income streams. Now, me personally, I think I have like five, but I used to have more. Some have gone by the wayside now, but my situation never changed because I have multiple. So if one ends, I'll go build another one somewhere else doing something else, but I always have income. Where what are we taught in school? Work hard, go to school, get good grades, get into college, get a good job. We are taught to be employees, really good ones. They'll teach us everything about whatever we pick. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all. I think there's a lot to be said of education. I think that when people see that you went to college, it's showing that, yeah, you can commit to something that you didn't have to do and you did it anyway. And it also sometimes can harm you. When I got out of college, I was told I'd be getting 35 and $40,000 a year job offers. Never got one. In fact, I was making when I got out of college, it's a funny story. I was making about $16.50 an hour working midnights at a Tim Hortons as a donut maker. And that's how I worked my way through college. I am a dinosaur that made it out with no debt. I walked out of school with not owing the college anything. But I worked full time, sometimes multiple jobs. But that being said, not everybody's going to accomplish it.
Mm,
But there's
yeah.
always a way. And I get out of school and then the best job I could find offered me $10.42 an hour to be a therapist at a halfway home for people that were transitioning, juveniles that were transitioning. That was the best offer I got was 10.42 an hour. And now I was told right after I got out of college I was overqualified to be a social. I said, I, I don't have any experience yet. How can I be overqualified to do this job?
Wow.
But
Yeah,
you move
and
on.
this world that we live in, it's so rapidly changing. And so I always tell my clients, my customers that you always have to be learning, you always have to be growing and be open to change. It's unfortunate, but it's not a world that we can just sit idle. So it's, I'm glad we're having this conversation, Dean.
That's great advice. Really, you look at nature. To your point, look at nature. What happens? If you look at a tree, the grass, anything, it's either growing or it's dying.
Hmm.
We are part of nature. We either need to be growing or we've stagnated ourselves and we're waiting to die. What does Les Brown talk about? He says most people die at 25 and they wait till 70 to be buried.
Hmm.
It's not untrue. And
Yes,
we're kind of
yes.
taught that, right? The work hard, go to school. The auto industry was awful, 30 and out. Everybody wanted to get that 30 and out plan. They'll go give the company 30 years and the company would give you a little pension to go live on when you were done.
Mm.
In your golden years, after you have carpal tunnel and your joints don't work right anymore, you just want to sit down because everything hurts.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's so in terms of, and I know we could go on for hours, Steve, but I want to ask you before I have to have you run off, is there anything that you want to share with the audience? And again, it can be around your speaking, it can be around your books as an author or as a performance specialist. Is there one message that you'd like to get out to the audience?
Yes. The biggest thing you need to know in anything you're going to do, the number one thing,
I'm going to write it down.
define
I'm
what you,
ready.
right? Is define what you want. Always define what you want first. Your brain is a miraculous problem solver. And if you ask a better question, it'll give you a better answer. It'll figure it out. We've all had the experiences where we've been thinking about some problem and you go to sleep and you wake up the next morning and you figured it out. All of a sudden you have this epiphany where, oh, if I try this, and it works. Your brain will figure it out. But if you keep feeding it negative thoughts or negative connotations or I can't do it or I don't know or that's great. That's what it's going to feed you back. Well, you don't know. Why? Because you don't know. Because you tell yourself you don't know. And instead of saying, yeah, I told a guy one time, he's like, I don't know how I could, if I can afford it. I said, well, what have you asked yourself? How can I afford it? This guy came up with all kind of way. Well, I could do this and I could do that, you just have to ask yourself better questions, and we tend not to.
It's true. And that's one thing I tell people also in my book, Emotional Strength Explained. It's a workbook. But part of that is if you write down an idea at night, if you have a question or if you have an idea and you're not sure what steps to take, if you write that down at night, the last thing before you go to sleep, when you wake up in the morning, you'll have that answer because as you stated, we have the answers. We really do know what we need to do. It's just not always easy to take those steps. So, Jean,
Well, it's
if
fear, right? It's fear.
it's
It's fear of failure. It's fear of not being liked. It's fear of not being loved. It's fear of rejection. It's imposter syndrome. Maybe I don't deserve that. Maybe I don't. It's all of those things, and they play on a loop in our heads most of the time, and none of it's true. How many times, Alicia, just personally, if you don't mind me asking you, have you ever got into a situation you had a lot of anxiety about it, and your mind played out every worst case scenario that was going to happen, and none of it happened?
that's daily, Jean. That
Yeah,
still happens daily.
and it does to all of us, but you have to learn to quiet that noise
Yes, yes.
because it's just noise.
And resilience comes into play because we're always going to have challenges. I know on my show we talk about it and with my clients and my community, my groups, the challenges will happen, whether it's something like related to technology, whether it's a challenge in, a greater strategic area or even just in your daily life. And oftentimes we don't have enough hands, we don't have enough time, and therefore we that imposter syndrome will creep in when you continually face these challenges. But if you use the resilience, if you build on it, and by resilience I mean looking at things with a positive outcome, with a positive
Right.
attitude, you're able to then do as you pointed out, which is to decide, make the decisions to live and to live as you want to live your life as you want to leave this life, as we hear Les Brown say.
But you're right. It boils down to, Viktor Frankl says it best. The one thing that man always has is the ability to decide. And here's what I look at. If I don't do it, what's going to happen? And if I do it, what's going to happen? And even if my brain starts taking me to all the ways that, well, this might happen, that might happen, this might go wrong, in fact, I told a guy this morning, hey, look, if I'm going to lose, I'm going to lose my way.
Mm,
I'm going to get to pick which way I'm going to lose. And it's never failed me. But it's funny because we listen to our brains. And how do we know, Alicia? Here's a little fun thing. How do we know that there's a new life inside of mom? It's not because we heard the brain waves or we saw the brain waves what do we hear first? The heartbeat.
the heartbeat, yeah.
So the heart is your brain. Before the brain ever develops, that
Mm,
starts going. So why don't we listen to our heart? It was
mm,
there first. And I
yes.
realized,
Oh,
yeah, you can get hurt, but hey, you can get hurt not doing anything.
mm,
You can go face the angst and pain and know that you made a choice and you tried to do something, or you can sit around and face the pain of regret.
yeah.
Let me tell you, there's a neat story that I got to experience. My father he was also, he was actually disabled. He was deaf in one ear and no one knew for a long time. And he had trouble in school, but he was a miraculous baseball player. Man, loved baseball, and he had offers to go play with the Tigers, the White Sox, and the Red Sox to go to training camp to try out, and he didn't go. And I remember asking him as a kid, like, Dad, why didn't you do that? He said, well, your grandparents never traveled, and I had never been out of the state. And honestly, I was afraid. I was afraid to leave and go do that. And so we were sitting watching a baseball game one afternoon. I looked over, and you could see the tears begin to well up in his eyes. I said, what's going on, Pop? He said, you see this guy stand at the plate? And I said, yeah. He said, I pitched against him in high school. And
Wow.
I thought, ouch,
Mm,
you could be pitching against him right now had you took that chance.
mm,
You had three major league teams looking for you.
wow.
So
Chance never taken.
I learned a lot from that afternoon that I thought I don't want to face the sting of regret because you will face it if you don't take the chances.
Yes, that's a wonderful story, and I hope all of our listeners are taking this to heart. I know that we all have things that we regret in life, and in fact, this was a question. My stepfather was the probably one of the greatest influences in my life, and he would always ask me, well, what if you don't do it? What if you don't try it? And I value that so much because I was able to go to a point in my life, probably my late 20s, where I had no regrets. Everybody around me were talking about the regrets that they had. Oh, I wish I had done this, or shoulda, coulda, woulda, right? And the
Yeah,
thing,
shoulda, coulda, woulda, if only Ida, all those people.
yeah, but I didn't have that in my life. And so it took a person that I knew to pass away for me to realize that I I had a regret finally that I didn't do enough for them in the time that they were here. I just figured we'd have years and years, and so that hits home for me. You don't get that time back. You don't get that
That's a
chance.
trap.
And every
That's
other area of my life, been able to put that forward. Even though I make a choice, it may not be perfect. I can make progress. So that's one of the things that I live by today, and it's such a good message to give out into the world. So,
Oh, it
Gene,
is. And people they should look, I'm sorry, I know you got a question, but
yeah,
they should look from self to self for progress, from self to others for possibilities. But we don't do that. We look to others and go, oh, well, I'm not as far ahead as that person. And they shouldn't do that. You look to yourself. Am I further ahead today than I was yesterday? Yeah. Well, great. Pat yourself on the back. Celebrate you. You're
yes,
better than you
yes,
were the day before. And that's the only person you need to compete with.
wonderful. So now we've talked about competition, growth. We've talked about, but we're gonna hit all the areas. No, but
Let's
Gene,
put all the checks in the box.
you're the first in the series of people I'm interviewing. in the Les Brown Mastermind Speakers Group. And I want to thank you for being here. Let me ask you, in terms of working that close with the great Les Brown, what is the thing that you are now coming to the world with your speaking?
So with working with Les, you still, no matter how good people tell you are, because I've actually, given speeches and I've been told how good they are and you still starstruck when you're sitting there with Les Brown. You're still in awe. You're still starstruck. And probably because, like I said, I've listened to him for a good portion of my life. But the thing I was able to come away with is that how when you telling a story to somebody, you need to make sure that always that the audience or whoever you're talking to, they're the star of the story. Even if it's about you, the story should be told in a way that draws them in and they go, yeah, I had an experience very similar to that, that it hits home for them and that it resonates so much that it either stirs them up or they decide, like you were talking about, they draw a line in the sand and say, no more, I'm not doing this anymore. Or it motivates them to make the phone call they needed to make or take the chance they needed to go take. That's the biggest takeaway I've gotten from Les. He has a wonderful way of being able to draw you into his story, whether it's about him being born on the floor, whether it's about him losing his DJ job, whether it's about him hearing Mr. Washington give the graduation speech and he wasn't supposed to be there. There are so many just absolutely wonderful stories that he drags you into, and it resonates because in some way we've all been in these places, even if it's just in our own minds. We've been in these places where we
Yes.
didn't think we could do anything.
Yeah, so true. And he does this on such a masterful level that, even for me, like I still get that same level of motivation week by week. I and
If you,
and I can't, you know, other people who do coaching and masterminds, you don't get that close to them. And so we are among the few, Gene, that have that privilege. And I know that we are going to help live out his legacy to be speakers, spreading these messages out into the world. I I'm just so grateful myself. I can't even tell you.
you're still starstruck, aren't you? Yeah, it's to me it's surreal that I think, wow, it's like the circle has come fully around because I look at it and I think, I remember when I was just hearing this guy on tape and I thought, man, if I could just be in an arena when he was talking to feel the energy that he puts out, I thought that would be something if I could just be in an arena when he's talking. But to be in a room of only 9 or 10 of us where we get to ask questions and interact with him and it's unlike anything I thought I'd ever be able to experience.
It is. Now, Gene, when you envision yourself in that arena speaking on
Mhm.
the stage, are you talking to the audience about obviously your stories and how it impacted you to motivate them, or do you have like a signature speech that you're working on to deliver?
I actually have both. I will take stories depending on who I'm speaking to or what's going on. I gave a speech one time for a Boys and Girls Club, and they had a assignment to do where they had to um there I guess they were competing for a scholarship. And part of that was they had to give a public speech. And so you had this room of young people that were, I would say anywhere from, oh, 12, 13 years old up to about 16, 17 years old that were in this room. And so I made it a point to let them know everything you do when you're speaking. So I gave them a speech on kind of how to give a speech or how to deliver. And I said, you have to be careful because people aren't listening to you. They're not hearing what you say. And I drove it home I stole a little bit from Joseph McClellan. He's got this thing when he comes on stage and everybody's applauding. He starts saying, oh, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it. Oh, stop it, stop it. And everyone keeps applauding, right? And so I had done this to these young people and they're looking at each other like, why are we applauding? He's saying, but they kept doing it. And the point is that people are watching you. We learn through the eye. And so the way you hold yourself, the way you move, when you make a point, you have to be careful of what's coming across in your physiology because that's really what people are watching. Only about 7% of what you're saying they're actually picking up. They're watching you. They want to see if you believe what you're telling them. And so it was funny because I went back later. I got to go back after these young folks. I was at like one of the first meetings and I went back after they were done. And the people that were working, they said, none of them forgot that. They kept saying, no, it was like what Gene was saying, that we got to be careful of how we're carrying ourselves and the manner that we're speaking in and what our tonality is. I mean, I gave it all to them. So it depends on the setting and who you're speaking to. But in your question, my probably if you want to say I have a keynote speech, it's the fact that I was labeled learning disabled. And that label carried through, as we talked about earlier, through junior high, to where people were just giving up on me. These people that were supposed to be helping me get through were giving up. And when I graduated from college, just as a side note, one of the things I did, I had a resource room teacher named Deborah Hessler. She's one of the most wonderful people on the planet. And I remember she would still show up. Her husband had cancer multiple times. She would still show up for work where she could have taken leave, but there was me and a few of us. There was like six of us in her resource room that she gave her time to. And so when I graduated from the University of Michigan, I called her. I looked her up and I found her and I called her. I sent her a ticket to go to that graduation. And standing in the corridor outside after I'd graduated, taking pictures with my family, and she took pictures with me, and she said, "I just want to tell you, I'm so proud of you." She said, "You'll never know." She said, "All those times that I was at the school and I was working with you kids, I had no idea the battle she was fighting to keep that program open. They were trying to end that program." And she was going to all these board meetings and doing all these things. And she said, yeah. And the first thing she did was one of the guys that was her strongest opponent and wanted this shut down. She called him and she said, "Oh, by the way, I just want to let you know this Saturday I'll be headed to the graduation of one of those kids you counted out. He's graduating from the University of Michigan today." And I thought, wow, I, I had no idea these people were fighting these battles for me. And now it shifted to where my mindset went, if you don't go do everything you can possibly do and become everything you can and help as many people as you can possibly help, you have let everybody down that poured into you.
Hmm.
You've let them all down because they gave you their time. They saw something in you and they gave you their time just lovingly.
Yeah, yeah, that's
But I
amazing. And
thought that was really cool that she got to have her say with this guy trying to put her out of a job and count us
yeah,
kids out.
and that's amazing that and you're here to tell that story, that testimony of how they really help to make a difference for more people. And I think that's what it's all about, right? We're here to not just live our life and find that fame or find that fortune, but we're here to make a difference and establish that connection. And in today's world, especially with all the fast moving technology, we need to make sure that we pay attention to what we tune into so that we don't lose sight of what we are going to turn into. And I love your story, Gene, about that, your personal approach. And so you're going to influence audiences, you're going to make impacts beyond your knowledge, even. So keep up the great work. And
Thank you.
yeah, and how can they find your book? I guess your new book is going to be available soon.
Find Your Passion, Live Your Dream is available on Amazon now. It's been available. The Motivation Manifesto, I believe I was told it's available on Amazon and you can get it at B. Dalton and different booksellers. I haven't really checked into it because, like I said, it's only been a week and a half. I know they sent me a handful of copies of it that I could give to family and friends or whatever. Um, but yeah, it should be available now. Unfortunately, the book cover with me and Les on it won't be available for about another month because I was just at the photo shoot and everything here a couple weeks ago for the book cover. So the current one only has a picture of Les on the cover, which still he's a very handsome man. So it really doesn't matter. But yeah, it's a fantastic book. Some of the other authors in there, when you read their stories and see it's funny because my wife and I were talking. My wife Jennifer, we've been together since we were children. We met. I took her to dinner on her 19th birthday. She was 18 when I met her. I was 19. And so we've been together. She is just absolutely wonderful. She supports me. Any little crazy thing. I don't know how she lived with me with my ADD so long. But any crazy thing I try to go do or tell her, I want to go try it. She'll go do it. Go try it. Go do it. She's just so supportive and so loving. She's one of the greatest people I know. And we were talking the other night about, well, if we start doing this, then where does this go? Because I don't like being away from her. I said, well, you're gonna have to start. You're gonna have to leave your job. And she said, I'm not leaving my job. I love my job. She said, I said, well, how are we gonna do this? She said, well, there's FaceTime and there's Zoom and there's all these things. So, and it's funny when you have somebody like that in your life, it makes things easier and it gets you to go further faster because I want to impress her. I want her to have everything she's ever dreamed of having. And if I can help supply that in some little way, but the fact is, it's in an old book written over 2,000 years ago. It says the greatest among you will be your servant. And it's true. It's like you said, Alicia. It's about service. It's the level of service and help you can provide. My company in Detroit took off when I started helping people that I wasn't getting paid to do it. I was literally one day helping repair speakers on a line. The guy come down there from quality. He couldn't figure out why they were having the problem. Everything was in spec. He came up with a fix for it, but he had to disassemble part of the speaker and do all this. And so I started helping him. And my colleague said, well, you're crazy, Gene. You're not getting paid to do that. Why? And I said, but I'm already here and I like him and I can learn stuff from him while I'm sitting here talking to him. I get to pick his brain while I'm here. Turned out he retired from the company, went to another company, a dominant company in the auto industry, and got a job there. I don't know how that's retirement, but whatever. And then came back looking for me and handed me a big contract with the other company, all because I helped him when I didn't have to.
Nice,
And it was
nice.
years later. I didn't know that was going to happen. I wasn't planning that. But I did it with no intention. I just helped where I saw somebody need help.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, Jean, I've learned so much getting to know you over these last few months, and I know that our listeners are going to get a lot from this interview. When I asked what was your greatest failure, you said that you you've reset goals, but you never really viewed anything as a failure. And if that doesn't say resilience, I don't know what does.
I
So,
reset a lot of goals, Alicia, but to say I mean, I don't know. I I don't accept failure. I don't accept it. There's always a way. I just haven't found it yet. And yeah, stuff
nice.
didn't happen on my timeline, sure, but it never does. If we're being honest, that's what frustrates us the most is that we think it should happen at this time, and it doesn't, and then we get frustrated. And yeah, I mean, I didn't even know this, but then when you started hearing quotes about like, Edison with his light bulb, he said he never failed. He figured out what 999 ways or something like that that it didn't work.
Yes,
When you look
yes.
at how many times that allegedly, Disney had to fail, that Sam Walton almost put his company under trying to make it. When you look at those types of things, Colonel Sanders, after he got his Social Security, figured out he couldn't live on that and started trying to sell his chicken recipe. And I forget it was almost 1,000 restaurants told him no before he found one that told him yeah. And that's what happens. You got to be tough as nails with your tender heart. You got to
Right.
love people. You got to accept them where they're at and know that if they're criticizing you, if they're not, it's not because they don't want you to make it. Because I'll tell you, the critics will become your biggest cheerleader when you make it. They're the ones that turn around and go, "Oh, if anyone was going to do it, I knew it was you. I knew you'd be the one to go do." And it's funny. You just got to make a game out of it. It's funny. And no, you're right. I don't view it as failure. It just didn't happen when I wanted it to happen. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And listen, when I wanted to be a pilot, I thought I was going to do that out of high school. And my parents don't listen. All right, but they're both deceased now. But I went and tried to enlist. They never knew that I did that. I went and took all the military because I wanted to go fly planes. My dad took me on a discovery flight as a kid. I remember flying over our house, seeing my sister on the porch, and I thought, I want to do this. This is freaking awesome. I want to do this. And the military said, no, go away. The Army said no. The Navy said no. The Air Force said no. You have ADD. We can't have, you have dyslexia. We can't have you in the, because of those records from when I was in first grade and got diagnosed as being learning disability, the military wouldn't take me. And I thought, I'm never going to get to go. And really, I wanted to do it because I wanted to touch a cloud. I wanted to know what that cotton ball in the air felt like.
Mm.
And I was at a family function. I was talking to one of my wife's uncles, and I found out he was a pilot, and he did it. That was his job. And I said, "Oh, like for Delta?" Like, he's like, "No, he flew for a private company. He just he was on retainer for X number of dollars a month, and when they wanted someone to go fly, he'd go get the plane out and take them wherever they wanted to go." I said, "Man, how'd you do that?" He said, "Well, go to your local airport," and I did. Guess what? In 2015, I started late August. By November 1st, I was ready to go take my practical test to get my pilot's license. And then the weather set in. And my goal was to have it by the end of 2015. Now, beginning in November, as in Michigan here, bad weather comes in and it's inclement. It'll be raining 1 second, snowing 1 second, sleeting, sunny. You'll get it all in one day. And I remember the examiner kept calling me. He had to keep canceling due to the weather. We got to cancel. We got to, and then Thanksgiving came and went. And I thought, I'm not going to get this, but there's got to be a way. I even thought about using a different examiner. And they said, no, you already paid this guy the down payment. Just tough it out. Finally, he called me. I think it was around December 19th. And he said, Gene, I'm sorry, but I'm booked through the end of the year. We got to cancel again. And I don't think you're going to hit it. Because I had already told him my goal. I said, no, I want to get this by the end of, I went before the end of the year. And I said, all right, well, here's the thing. If anybody cancels, you call me, put me on the top of the list. And he chuckled. He said, okay, if anybody cancels. We were at my in-laws. It was Christmas Eve. And Lee Stanley called me. And he said, you're never going to believe this, but a guy just canceled. And if you want, you can come take your test on December 26th. I have a slot available at 9 a.m. I said,
Wow.
put me down. And on December 26th of 2015 at about, oh, 10:47 in the morning, I got my pilot's.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
And
And
I've got my goal.
you didn't give up and it happened for you. And that has happened so many times, people. When you see the goal and you set your sights on it and you don't give up and you're resilient and you go forward, you can make that happen. Those realities occur. The doors open. It's amazing. I've said it before. It's like magic. So that's amazing, Gene.
People
All
say
right. Well,
if I see it, I'll believe it. No, if you believe it, you can see it.
true. I love that. Well, with that, we're going to believe it and achieve it, and we're going to do it together. Everybody, check out the Real Gene online. You can find him on the socials. You can reach out to him directly. He'll be glad to connect with you. Find him wherever books are sold. Look for the new book coming out. Of course, he's available for speaking opportunities. So reach out to Gene, and thank you for listening.